I've got not one, but two of the FMS FCX24M mini trail bashers, and today we're gonna take a look at these things, tear them apart, take them for a bash, and by the end of the video, I'll tell you how you can win one of these. And since these are gonna be direct competition to the Axial SCX24, I got one of those too. These cars are 1/24th scale, they come in two different wheelbases and a few different body styles, and they've got one particular feature in them that might make them the best trail basher you can buy in this size. Overall, no matter which one you pick, you're gonna be getting the same basic drivetrain, though the tire size does change, wheelbase changes, and a few other small bits and pieces change, such as this rear drive shaft. Underneath the body, which is held together by Velcro, we've got a 2S 380 milliamp hour battery with room for a larger one. A pretty big motor. This motor is actually bigger than the one on the Axial. You can see here how much smaller that Axial motor is. We've got a 2-in-1 ESC with light controller. Got a nice little servo on axle, oil-filled shocks. Most of the SCX24s only come with friction shocks, but the real party piece of this truck is this transmission. You can see there's another servo here, and that's a shift servo for this 2-speed transmission, and that's what I think is gonna make this thing a great little trail truck, because it should be quite a bit faster out of the box than the SCX24, and that low gear should still give you plenty of low-speed control. We've also got foam-filled tires. The SCX24 does not. Underneath, we've got all plastic links going to plastic axles, although I'm pretty sure most of this drivetrain is metal. We're gonna pull that apart in just a few minutes and check. That is very similar to the SCX24. However, there is one big difference. The SCX24 actually uses a worm gear differential. This uses a standard differential. That's gonna allow this to coast. That worm gear differential means the SCX24 can't coast, which is fine for rock crawling, but not the best for trail driving. As you can see here, you can coast with this, and the stock ESC has an adjustable drag brake. The bodies themselves are all highly detailed. These are Land Rover and Range Rover bodies. I think they look pretty good, though they are a little bit dated, especially given some of the modern options you get with the SCX24. However, whether or not you like that is just a personal styling choice. We're also gonna have lights on the front, hopefully not turn signals. We'll check that out in a few minutes. And on this one, we've got a real spare tire, while on this one, we've got a tow hook and mud flaps, so each vehicle will have its own unique accessories. Let's get this body and tires off and see just what that drivetrain's made of. If you're gonna be working on these, you will need a 50 thousandths hex bit. I recommend getting a good quality one, as it's really easy to strip out these small screws if you're not careful. First off, we'll be taking this battery out. We've got two straps that hold the battery in. Like I said, this is a 380 milliamp hour LiPo battery. You do get one of these USB balance wall chargers, but honestly, I recommend you just take this and throw it straight into the trash. First of all, these things are never very good. And second of all, if you look at this battery, this is 380 milliamp hour. This thing charges at 1 amp. That's basically charging this at nearly 3C. That might be okay, but I definitely don't recommend it, especially with these little batteries. I would definitely recommend investing in a decent battery charger that lets you adjust settings and monitor what's happening with your battery while it's charging. We've got some nice cable organization here. Unfortunately, in order to take the body off, we are going to have to remove that cable organization. If you haven't worked on these little cars before, make sure you take really good care of these screws, because they're really easy to lose. And in case you were wondering, yes, the SCX24 does primarily use the same type of 50 thousandths head screws. Taking this first wheel off, it is a nice soft compound and it is foam filled. However, it is not glued to the rim. With these slower, smaller vehicles, that's usually not a big deal. But if you find it's a problem, you can always glue these on. These tires do feel really nice though, and I think they're gonna be great for general trail bashing and some rock crawling. Underneath that, you can see we've got a steel stub axle and ball bearings. These shocks feel really, really good. Sometimes with these small vehicles, the oil-filled shocks don't feel very good. They did a pretty decent job on these. As you can see, these are plastic bodied, but they feel really good and they aren't leaking, which is definitely a plus. The axle hubs are held in with the link screws, and as you can see, you've got two different options for where to put the screws, and that changes the caster angle for the axles. That's a nice touch. I can't guarantee all of them will be like this, but so far all the screws have been the same length, which is really handy. We've got plastic links here, but they do have steel ends in them. The SCX24 uses plastic links, but with plastic ends as well. And here we can get a better look at that servo on axle setup. Looks pretty nice. We do have a built-in servo saver here, and that looks like a plastic steering servo. We'll have to see how that holds up to some abuse in a little bit. Looks like this axle is going to be one complete piece held together by these 4 screws. And you can see these front hubs do have little metal bushings in them. That really helps prevent them from binding when you get dirt and grit in there. These front axles are little tiny CVDs. The SCX24 actually uses dog bones in the front. Whether or not this is going to be stronger or weaker remains to be seen. You do have to take these axles completely apart in order to get to the gears in the middle. And that includes taking this knuckle off, removing this sleeve, disassembling the CVD, and then taking the front hub off. And once we have that off both sides, we can go ahead and finish taking the axle apart. You can see we've got some sintered steel gears in here. This is an interesting design. This front axle shaft is actually just one single piece as opposed to being two pieces. That should make for a pretty strong unit. However, that probably means you won't be able to get actual front or rear differentials without upgrading all of this. So there we go, one completely disassembled front axle. So far, I think everything looks pretty good, but the real interesting stuff's gonna be in this 2-speed transmission. So let me get this put back together. We'll take this apart, and then coming up, we're gonna do some direct comparisons between the SCX24 and the FCX24M. And don't forget, we're gonna be giving one of these away. One thing I want to mention is no matter which brand you're working with, working on these little 1/24th scale cars is not for the faint of heart. You're going to need good eyes and a steady hand to work on things like these axles. There are some very small parts in here that are easily lost, and it can get frustrating trying to put them back together. And of course, taking this transmission out is going to be a little bit more complicated than most transmissions simply because of this servo, but it looks like we've got 4 screws here on the bottom and then these links, and we'll see if it'll come out. It is nice to see some cable organization on here that isn't zip ties. They don't have it for everything, but they do have some of it. And we just need to unplug these. There we go. And you can definitely see just how much longer this motor is than the one that comes on the SCX24. Should definitely give us some more power. We did have one partially stripped screw holding this servo in, which is just a little bit frustrating. And you want to be really careful when removing these things. Make sure you don't get this wire bent out of shape, because it can definitely cause you a headache down the road. I've mentioned this before, but I'll go ahead and mention it again. If you don't have to take these kinds of things apart, I'd recommend not doing it, because there's going to be a bunch of small parts inside here as well. Now, if you enjoy seeing me take my stuff apart so you don't have to, make sure you get subscribed, because we're doing that kind of stuff here all the time. Okay, we have a steel pinion and steel spur gear, which is a really nice start. However, the shaft for that gear is just going into plastic here, no metal bushing. Hopefully, I'm not going to get a face full of springs and gears here. All right, and we can see in here we've got all metal gears as well as an all metal shifting system for that 2-speed transmission. That's a pretty nice benefit over the axial transmission, which I'm pretty sure is all plastic. So this should definitely be able to handle more abuse. Plus we've got the advantage of those 2 speeds. Let me get this together. I've got a few more things to show you before we go out and test these things. One really cool thing I noticed is that these actually have contra-rotating output shafts. That means the front output shaft spins one direction while the rear output shaft spins the other direction. What that does is it eliminates that body roll that happens under acceleration when you have both shafts spinning in the same direction. That's a really nice touch that, again, you don't get on the SCX24. And I will say, for how many gears are in here, this transmission does feel nice and smooth. So far, I'm seeing a lot of advantages that this thing has over the SCX24, but there's going to be some inherent disadvantages too that we'll talk about at the end of the video. But for now, let's get this thing put back together, see how it actually performs. We've got 2 more things to cover before we go get these things dirty. I'm going to tell you how to win one of them. But first, we need to talk about control. This is the transmitter for the SCX24, and this is the transmitter for the FCX24M. This is a full-size transmitter, and this is a mini transmitter. And you may immediately gravitate toward the full-size transmitter, but I want to make a case for the smaller transmitter. This thing's actually pretty nice. It feels really good, though the steering wheel is a little bit quirky, but primarily it's much, much smaller. And I think it's a much better match for these little cars, because when you're taking these little cars out bashing, do you really want a transmitter that's twice the size of the car you're bringing with you? Personally, I think this is a great little transmitter, and overall, I think this is a better option than having a big full-size transmitter like this. But what you really want to know is how to win one of these. All you need to do is make sure you're subscribed, like the video, then leave a comment letting me know which one you want, either the Range Rover or the Land Rover, or heck, if you want the SCX24, I'll send that one to you. Let me know what you do with it, and I'll be picking a winner soon. All right, let's go see how these things perform. First test is going to be hill climb. Let's see how the Axial does first. Doing good so far. Getting closer. Just about to the top, and she's slipping. A little more wheel speed. And that's about it. Now for the FMS, this is shorter wheelbase, so it is a little bit disadvantaged, but it does have stickier tires. Let's see how it does. Definitely not slipping. You can see those tires flexing, and it fell over pretty much at the same point as the Axial started slipping. All right, let's check side hill holding. It can stay there. It's good there. Good there. Just starts to tip over there. Just tips over there. That's about maxed out for the Axial. Can the FMS do better? Well, we'll start with where the Axial is. No problem. A little bit higher. No problem, a little bit higher. Still no problem, a little bit higher. Still good. Still good. and right about there. So you can see that the FMS definitely side hills better than the Axial does out of the box. Next, let's check low speed control. Axial can definitely crawl. Feels like it's got pretty good low speed control. Yep, even going over that stick feels really, really nice. Now for the FMS. Okay, right on throttle, it's not quite as sensitive, but it still crawls pretty well. I think we'd have to give the edge on this one to Axial, though. Let's now try the high-speed test, where I think the FMS is going to walk all over the Axial. All right, Axial first. And that's 2 miles an hour top speed. Now the FMS in low gear. And I think that's even slower. Yep, 1 mile an hour top speed. Now let's bring out the secret weapon. And that is a lot faster. Yep, 4 mile an hour top speed. That's twice as fast. Raw crawling performance feels pretty similar. The Axial has the edge in a few places, and the FMS has the edge in a few other places. However, the FMS absolutely crushes the Axial in top speed, and I think that's going to be really advantageous for the next thing we're going to do. Let's take this thing trail riding. Okay guys, I can say right off the bat that these things absolutely dominate the SCX24 for general bashing. I haven't done any hardcore rock crawling, but for just normal bombing around, trail bashing, and having fun, these things are awesome. That 2-speed transmission makes all the difference when it comes to trail riding, because you can shift it into low gear, do all the rock crawling and slow stuff you want, but then you can shift it into high gear, and this thing will even do wheelies, which is really impressive. I'm also really impressed with the drivetrain on this, because in order to do those wheelies, I was going full reverse to full forward on concrete, and I probably did that 50 or 60 times because it's a lot of fun, and that is probably the most stress you can put on a drivetrain, and this drivetrain has held up absolutely perfectly. So overall, these cars are really, really fun. They've got the 2-speed transmission, oil-filled shocks, arguably better differentials for trail riding, more power, I think a better battery strap system, a more convenient and handy transmitter, better tires with foams, all steel gears throughout, and the best thing is they're cheaper than the SCX24 at regular price. The SCX24 is on sale right now, but it isn't usually on sale. At regular price, these things are $119 a piece, or if you buy 2 of them, you get 10 bucks off each one of them. Now, of course, there are disadvantages to these cars. Anytime you buy something that's not coming from Horizon or Traxxas, parts availability is going to be a concern. Upgrades are going to be limited if there are any upgrades available, and support may or may not be there. The SCX24 comes with a 2-year warranty, and in general with Horizon, you know if you need that warranty, it's going to be available. Now, I'm not saying you won't have a warranty with these, but if it's not Horizon or Traxxas, it's always a little more iffy. That being said, if you want a really fun, versatile little trail truck, it's hard to go wrong with one of these, and don't forget to put down in the comments why you want to win one of these, what you do with it. Make sure you're subscribed, and then check out one of these videos.